without any idea of this whole secret technological Illuminati world going on behind the scenes. So I'm not really sure which is right, but it seems both of those are kind of going on. What do you think about some of these ideas?
Well, 9/11, I don't know. I kind of think it was. Well, okay. Well, here, this is what I'm gonna say. There was clips of people saying right after 9/11, they instantly had this whole thing set up. Oh, we got to go to Afghanistan. We got to go to Iraq. We got to do a war on terror. I mean, I can't remember the guy's name. I wish I did. But there's this Israeli guy who was on like literally within minutes of it happening, and he said, I don't know who did it, but it might have been Obama.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. They were.
Yeah.
I think it was within 10 minutes on. Oh, I can't remember if it was Fox or NBC or something. It was like 7 or 10 minutes. Like, oh, it could have been Osama bin Laden. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. Did I say Obama? That'd be
Sorry,
funny.
did I just say Obama?
No. I thought I did. Maybe I said Osama.
Well, their names are so similar, and you know my thesis on that. But anyway, go ahead though. I don't want to ruin your train.
No, that's why it'd be funny. That's what I thought. No, so I mean, yeah, and then also you look at, well, you get into numerology, and then I find it so interesting. I've known this for a while, but for some reason I've just been thinking about that first famous New World Order speech by George Bush in 1990, where he talks about, the New World Order and all this. He uses like a shining purpose and all this weird, bizarre language. That was on September 11th, 1990. So, I mean, September 11th, man, I think it was a huge Illuminati ritual. But then I also kind of think it does tie in. It might have multi-purpose. So I think it was definitely like an occult Illuminati ritual. But I mean, the more political purpose of it, I kind of agree with too, with the New World Order using it just to, because they need those huge events to really accelerate things that would normally incrementally take like 10 years, to get to that point of legislation and cracking down on civil liberties. They need these huge events. But yeah, I don't know. That's what I think on 9/11 is kind of a multi-purpose. It was just a huge ritual.
So you're saying you think you really can see clear, 9/11, then that led to step 1, then step 2, step 3. So.
Oh yeah, man. 9/11. I mean, I've always known. I've known 9/11 was an inside job for a long time, but you can just, in retrospect, hindsight's always 20/20. You can just look at it now, and that was a huge stepping stone to this total hell, dark ecstasy world they're creating.
Yeah, I look at it as not so much that way, but more of they totally didn't need to do it that way. They could have just attacked Afghanistan, just put on the news everywhere and said, "Oh, the Taliban is mistreating women. We have to save them," or something, because that's exactly analogous to what they did with Saddam. So now, yeah, you do have a point. It seems like the impetus was 9/11, but it didn't have to be that way. So 9/11 has to be some kind of greater technology, according to my thesis. I'm just speculating here, trying to figure out things as best I can. But was the impetus of some greater technology of the overall ritual in the dark ecstasy world, and it would appear that it has strong. It's like everything changed on 9/11, but it was like everybody was ready for it to change or something, and people weren't ready to go back. And because we could have just bounced. I mean, even now, people are still. I mean, half the people have forgotten about 9/11. You go ask the average person, they're like, "Oh yeah," especially the younger people, but they're still operating in the same mentality that was created on that, that 9/11 time. So there's lots of weird psychological things going on, and it's hard to figure out exactly what the story is. But in general, what I think 9/11 ultimately was just sort of, now reality is created by the television, and we have this sort of hyper reality. It's a virtual Brave New World virtual world that we sacrifice all of our consciousness for television. So now what we can have is a scenario where the Illuminati masters basically just shape consciousness in any way that they please, and that's part of the whole global world ritual. So that's what I think 9/11 ultimately was. Just there's no real point to it. It was just sort of a fun little ritual form. So, any thoughts?
Oh, well, man, as far as the dark ecstasy ritual, if you watch those clips of 9/11, it is such powerful dark ecstasy. You could see the dark masters just, oh man. I mean, it must have empowered them so much, because you see all the people screaming, running around with blood pouring from their face. It is absolute hell. I mean, those clips, I can't watch them too much. They really affect me powerfully. I mean, man, I remember after watching this documentary on 9/11, not a conspiracy documentary, but it was that one that the firefighters, the people that were the firefighters made. They actually got the clip of the first plane hitting. Well, supposedly, but anyways, just that, like the with the bodies falling. They're in the lobby of the World Trade Center before it fell, and you hear, they say these loud noises, these bang, and what that was people jumping out of windows, falling to the ground. Mm-hmm. And sorry, I'm not trying to. I know this is really hard to even talk about and people to hear, but they need to understand that the controllers of this world and the dark, the dark ecstasy, the dark ecstatic matters that Jeff talks about, did this for a sort of ritualistic dark ecstasy purpose, because the energy they must have created from that scene is immense. And then, and then we know they do this on, smaller levels too, like with sleep paralysis. So 9/11 must have just been the ultimate dark ecstasy ritual form. So no, I totally agree with that. But all I was saying is I think there's just a dual purpose. I do kind of agree with the political purpose, but then mainly, yeah, it would be the dark ecstasy ritual.
Yeah, there's so much ritual involved with it. I think the conspiracy movement still isn't totally on that, because whenever I bring up dark ecstasy, I get people attacking me and saying, "Oh, that just doesn't make any sense." And then, I come back to them and say, New Age. Yeah, exactly right. It's just some crazy idea of consciousness or something. But then my response to them is, why does every politician in the world always act in a predictable way, namely attack their own people? Why does every politician in the world basically never do anything that helps their people? Even the good examples of a politician, it's very hard to think of any. Even in those cases, all you can point out is maybe like one or two things that they did. And then there's this whole list of things they did to attack the people. Well, that's just simply not a coincidence. It's because they're all orchestrated to act in the same way, because there's a group controlling the political systems behind the scenes to make the world this total, it's basically a theater of chaos. And so, I mean, anybody who wonders what we're talking about with dark ecstasy, I mean, there's my response to you, that it's really an empirical issue, and that's the empirical, I just described the empirical nature of it. It's just the whole, if you want to understand the whole world, it doesn't make any sense until you insert into your thesis the idea that there's this ultra sadomasochistic, bizarre, satanic force behind everything, and then everything makes sense. All stories of history make sense. The whole program of history, the modern world, the plagues, the false flag events, everything. Whether you hold mainstream views of history or conspiracy revisionist views of history, both views make sense as soon as you implant that thesis in. And before you implant that thesis in, I mean, in other words, when you don't implant that thesis in, that there's a satanic murder force behind a secret murder government behind everything, your whole view of history is a complete joke. You scratch your head, gee, why did Hitler team up with the Pope? That's so strange that happened. And how did Hitler get all that money to create, bring Germany from total slumhood to the most powerful nation in the world in 4 years? Gosh, it's just all so weird, and everything's, David Icke does a good job describing how this, they think everything's it's a coincidence and so forth. So, yeah, the ritual behind everything is just staggering, and it all has to do with a higher technology that we've are just trying to figure out what it is. And I'm surprised often when conspiracy theorists sort of reject this or something, when the evidence is just staggering. I remember, check this out, Ed. Remember when the Gulf oil spill happened, which, as you know, I assert was fake. And one of the primary numbers, there was really 3 Illuminati numbers that were behind that. 621, 44, and 711. Of course, 711 has been used before. And, with this, I think there was a terrorist attack, a supposed Al-Qaeda fake false flag terrorist attack in India, 7/11/06, I think it was. And, all the dates. And 44, of course, is widely used. I remember during that time, how people have those clock episodes? You look at the clock and it says 11:11. You and I have talked about this, Ed, and you've got this is very powerful in your life. And a lot of people I talk to are reporting this. I remember during the Gulf event, I was constantly having, 440 or 404. So in other words, a 44 show up on the clock. It was just for like 3 months. It was just pervasive. I mean, I wouldn't be thinking about it. Look at my my digital voice recorder or a clock or something. It would say 40 or 44 would show up. And then I found out that the Illuminati, one of the main numbers they use in their fake wag the dog Gulf oil spill was 44. And then I kept seeing in different ways, not on clocks but in the computer, I kept seeing 621 and the variations of that number, such as 216 and 261 and so forth, show up absolutely everywhere in a different aspect of my life. And that number absolutely dominated, and I've shown this on YouTube videos, dominated the wag the dog oil spill. So, and it was mainly during those times. So it's interesting, I had those. If you notice this stuff, if you're really paying careful attention to your life. If you're not, you might kind of miss it and so forth. I mean, as most people do. There's just so many patterns and themes and little event correlations and stuff, numerological events and telementational events. That's just another word for, it's a specialized word for law of attraction and consciousness activities. So it appears that what was happening was during those times, I was having all these numerical events, which were correlated with the Illuminati's events that they choreographed down in the fake Gulf oil spill. So there appears to be a larger something going on that's just staggeringly huge. It's amazing to us because we've been taught that everything really means nothing, like you've pointed out so well, Ed. Reality is just nothing, and nothing's really special, blah, blah, blah. But really, there's just a supercharged, special, supernatural reality everywhere. And, in the conspiracy movement, when we run into something big, we kind of just sit there like a deer in the headlights saying, I can't believe it. But we really need to just slap ourselves and get moving and say, okay, now we got to move to the next thing because we got a whole lot of work. There's so much to figure out. I mean, we're at the first second of the whole year. I mean, that's about how far we've gotten into discovering all this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, actually, it reminds me of something I've been realizing more and more. The whole thing with the more you think, the less you know, and the fact that we're catching on to a lot of the stuff the Illuminati is doing now, but they're 10 billion miles ahead of us. We're just at the very first mile. It can get kind of intimidating, it's like, okay, so we now know this, but they've already thought so far ahead. I mean, they're the ones who, the Illuminati, I mean, they'll fund both sides of wars. They control literally everything. And as far as right now, this world is run by, the Horned God. So they're so far ahead of us, and we're figuring this out now. Are we ever going to even get near, the level they're at? But that's just negativity, and I'm kind of playing devil's advocate.
It's good. That's a question, man. It's good to ask questions.
I mean, what do you think? I mean, do you think we're even close?
I think we're close. Yeah, I think we're. I mean, you listen to Antimatter Radio, the subscriber show, and I'm not necessarily trying to do an advertisement for it. Oh, speaking of advertisement, there's something I wanted to say here, but I'm just saying the facts. I mean, I've got subscribers. I've got a few hundred, and that's cool with me. I'm doing this for passion, but I mean, on the Antimatter Radio show, I mean, daily we're just making these massive leaps forward. On show after show after show, and I mean, sometimes I just sit there and it'll just preoccupy my thoughts for the rest of the day, and I'm thinking, if we keep this up, in a couple of years, we're going to be. I mean, there's other people doing this too. There's Antimatter's one of many. You're making these huge strides. If you're listening to a radio show that says the same thing every day, if you like that, that's great. Keep it up. But I mean, if you want more, go to another radio show. Go to different books. Do something. Sit in the corner and figure it all out for yourself in your own consciousness, because I think we're just a small hair. I mean, it's like a chain reaction. When you figure one thing out and you get the taste for it and the vibe for all this explosive, awareness, this telementational reality, it's just like a chain reaction. You just figure out thing after thing after thing after thing. So, yeah, I think it's likely that we're ready for a whole. I do go into the whole consciousness shift is coming for many, many reasons. Not because of 2012, but because of numerology, like I've been discussing on recent shows. I mean, actually last Friday's show. I mean, we just entered a whole new numerological age. And numerology is the real science of numbers, the real science that describes our cosmos. You've all been told that it's some stupid little game and it's a joke and only wackos pay attention to it, but that you've been taught that because it's the very thing that's real. And of course, you're not supposed to think the real stuff is actually real. But I mean, we just entered a whole numerological age where there's twos in everybody's year dates of their being born, and and now I mean, we're this thing called the personal year in numerology. We all have a personal year. It's defined by the year that you're in. 2010 is the current year, and it has We used to have all these ones in our dates, 1973, 1642.